Currently, almost 4% of US GDP comes from venture capital investments, while it's under 2% in South Africa. SAVCA launches a venture capital survey today and will provide an in-depth analysis of new trends, stats and insights into the Southern African venture capital market. Joining us now for more on this is Malcolm Segal. He's chairman of SAVCA. Thanks so much, Malcolm, for joining us this afternoon. Let's perhaps start off with a view of the landscape we're looking at right now. When it comes to venture capital, what are we looking at in terms of appetite for and then availability of in the current environment?
So I think the environment is increasingly positive. There's growing traction and growing understanding of the venture capital asset class. I'm differentiating between private equity, and this is pure venture capital we're talking about. Still in its early stages of development in South Africa, but the trends are positive.
Trends are positive. Where are you seeing this kind of financing model get most traction from on a sector basis?
Well, it's actually interesting. It's quite diverse. As one would expect, probably a third of it going into ICT, information, communications and related technologies, but also bio, energy, and pretty diverse. If you look at our graph, you'll see that it's actually well spread across the economic sectors.
Just how much more stringent have the criteria become from a venture capitalist's perspective? Given the kind of operating environment and the economic environment these businesses are operating in right now, one would assume they're taking on a whole lot more risk, especially if you're looking at the startup ventures and the capital that's required to fund those.
I think that the market in South Africa the depth is improving and the quality is improving. So one is seeing a lot of deal flow, but the interesting thing is that a relatively small percentage of the deal flow actually translates into funded ventures. And I suppose that is to be expected. One has a lot of people coming with a lot of ideas. They're very passionate about it, but the venture capital looks at the commerciality of it. And specifically what we're looking for in VC are novel, new ideas, things that really have traction in international markets. The South African market is too small for pure venture. We're talking about technologies that have global applications.
Absolutely. What's interesting as well, and I was mentioning it to Lindsay at the start of the show, Gauteng is the largest base for venture capital transactions, but you've got Cape Town receiving more venture capital funds than either Johannesburg or Pretoria. Run us through that kind of trend that seems to be playing itself out.
Look, it is a very interesting dichotomy. It seems to be that the venture capital community, the fund managers, are locating themselves around Cape Town and Stellenbosch, and there's a nice sort of incubation hub.
It's which the fresh air.
Yeah, and I suppose in a way, perhaps all the wine, but perhaps it's linked to, maybe Stellenbosch and that area will become the Silicon Valley of South Africa, or perhaps even of Africa. But the number of deals, the transactions actually being executed seem to be more in around the Gauteng area, Johannesburg, Pretoria. But also an interesting finding compared to our previous survey, which was done about 2 years ago, is that there are a number of deals being done KwaZulu-Natal and other parts of the country.
Yeah. Well, what kind of success rate are we looking at, in terms of businesses actually going forth once they've got that capital secured right now?
Yeah. So look, the incubation process is long. What we are seeing is that the number of deals is increasing and the capital under management and the deals under management is growing. But that incubation period can be anywhere 5, 7, 8, maybe 10 years. So in certain respects, it's too early to tell what the outcome will be. Yeah. But anecdotally, we are seeing the fund managers are positive about the investments they have under management.
What about the businesses themselves, whether it be in South Africa or Africa? I mean, in the past there was a perception around venture capitalists, what they actually did for a business, and there was some apprehension from business owners themselves as to whether or not to let go of the reins, so to speak.
So I think that is definitely the case. One of the findings of our survey is that there is a gap in the understanding what the venture capitalists perceive to be an equitable and reasonably structured deal is in some ways quite far apart from what the innovator and the entrepreneur thinks is a fair deal. One of the things we find, which is interesting in South Africa, is that the average equity owned across the spectrum of deals is just a touch under 40%. Now, in many economies, that figure is probably over 70%. So there's definitely a gap in South Africa.
In South Africa, can you talk through it on a continental basis? What kind of traction are we seeing venture capitalists make on the continent itself?
So I can talk more broadly. We are closely associated with the African Venture Capital and Private Equity Association called SAVCA, a sister association of ours. And certainly on a private equity perspective, the availability and accessibility and number of deals being done on private equity is incredible, just vastly more extensive than it's been. The traction is excellent. But our VC survey, with the specific survey that we are talking to now, covers only South Africa.